Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our live chat. We are Education and Migration Services Australia, and we're just starting to get online to start the live chat. First of all, I would like to invite you to our free migration seminar. We do this free migration seminar every 3 months, and I would like to invite Sydney on the 13th of February. Gold Coast 14th of February, Brisbane 15th of February, and Melbourne 17th of February. Remember, this is free. You can sign in our website, or you can sign also on our Facebook page. And when we finish this live chat, we will send you all the details so you can sign. And if you are in all those cities, then you are more than welcome to learn a little bit more about the migration system and also Australia. Okay, so now here we are with our senior migration agent, Shannon Semenikov, who's ready to answer all your questions. Please send your questions on the live chat, and we will be reading the question and also answering in the same time. So Shannon, welcome.
Thank you, Diana. Do you want to go and answer questions? Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Deanna, thank you for the introduction. Like Deanna just said, we're here to do live chat today to answer any questions you have about education and migration in Australia. And like Deanna said, if you just enter those questions type those questions in, or send us an email with your questions, we'd be happy to respond to them. Just to get the ball rolling, we've had a few questions that got emailed through over the last couple of days and on our blog. So what we'll do is we'll get Deanna to start off with one or two of those questions until we have some more come through.
Okay, so the first question is from Laura Guerra. She is from Ecuador, and she was asking, how do I choose the right education agent if I decide to do a process in Australia?
Okay, so Laura, that's a great question, and obviously one that's a little bit topical at the moment. One of the things we have had in the news recently is some issues that some students have had with education agents. I was interviewed the other day by ABC, and one of the things I said that most education agents or the industry as a whole is reputable. But when choosing an education agent, I guess it's important to choose someone that you trust throughout the process. Obviously, it's a big step coming to a new country, studying in a new country. Applying for a visa can be a bit of a challenging process as well. So you need to know exactly what the agent is going to do for you and do on your behalf. So it's important to make sure that, I guess, they've got experience where you can, that they've got qualified education counsellors or even migration agencies. I mean, one of the benefits we have is that we're an education agency and a migration agency. So what that means is that we're able to advise people both on the education side of things, but also on the migration side of things as well. So that means that we've got dual professionals working on each case as well.
Thank you. Another question from Sanjit Manpreet. As an international student, why would I choose Australia instead of England?
Okay, Manpreet, I mean, that's a good question as well. Sorry, I just turned the volume down on my screen there. Listen, I mean, when it comes to choosing a country to study in, there's a lot of factors to take into consideration. I think one of the benefits that Australia has in promoting itself internationally is the benefit that students are allowed to work while they're studying as well. So for most students, they're allowed to work 20 hours a week whilst their courses are in session and full-time during holidays. There are also some additional sort of options for people that are studying their masters or PhD for their dependents to work full-time. The other benefit that we have that other countries we've seen pull back on in the last little while is the ability to gain a post-study work visa. So if you do come to Australia and you study a bachelor or a master's degree, you can potentially work or get a visa to work for 2, 3 or 4 years after you graduate. So that's another, I guess, plus. It gives the opportunity to gain some experience. So I was in the Philippines last week talking to a friend over there whose daughter studies in the United States. And one of the things she was saying is that it makes it very difficult, and I guess given the new president, it might even be more difficult, but for students to actually stay on and study, work post their study in that state.
Thank you. Another question is, how long does the migration process take?
Ooh, okay, that's right. It's a bit of a general question, so I'll give you my best answer. If I guess you're looking at skilled migration, when it comes to skilled migration, depending on your occupation, and if you have an occupation in demand on the list and the skills assessment process, I guess the quickest you could potentially get residency would probably be around 4 months if you were going through skilled migration. Generally, we advise our clients that the process can take about 6 months. Can be longer in some cases, but it all depends on how organised you are and how long the skills assessing authority takes for your particular occupation. Some can be fast-tracked and done quickly, while others do take a little bit longer to complete.
Thank you. In terms of migration, is there any best month or period of time to apply for permanent residency?
Okay, so with respect to a best month, okay, there's no real best month to apply for residency. I mean, generally the skilled occupation list can change every July. So what that means is that each occupation has a ceiling or a quota, which is the maximum number of people that can apply in that occupation. So those quotas or ceilings get reset on the 1st of July. So what that means is there's generally more space in the first half of the year between July and December. And as we go through now, sort of from January to June, a lot of those occupations will get closer to their ceiling or their limit, which means that positions might be more limited and you may need to have more points in order to apply in those occupations. There's nothing to stop you applying now, but if you can apply for a visa, the sooner you sort of, I guess, move on that process and get it going, the better it's going to be. So just to recap, where we're at the moment, guys, if you've just joined us, I noticed some new people have just jumped online. We're running this live chat for international students to ask, or international people, I should say, in general, to ask any questions they have about studying in Australia, migration to Australia, or anything you would like to know about Australia that myself or one of our team can share with. Our company's called Education and Migration Services Australia. We're based in Brisbane, the Gold Coast and Melbourne in Australia, but we also have offices internationally as well. And we assist people, I guess, through the whole studying in Australia process, but also migration to Australia. We also assist companies in sponsorship and other areas as well. Yes, and to recap, we are going to be having a free migration seminar, which is coming up. The seminars are going to be held in Brisbane, the Gold Coast, Sydney and Melbourne. And they're coming up in 2 weeks' time. They'll be in each one of those cities. It's a free migration seminar, so if you did want to come along, bring along any questions that you may have. You can find links to it on our website, which is www.emsaus.com, or on our Eventbrite page, which is emsaus.eventbrite.com.au, and all the information is in there as well. Question from Melissa Bro here that's just come through online. Do we have seminars in the US? Unfortunately, Melissa, at the moment we don't have seminars planned for the US, but it is something that we're looking at. I'm actually heading to Mexico next month, and we'll be conducting presentations around different parts of Mexico, predominantly in Mexico City, to help skilled migrants come to Australia, but also looking at student opportunities as well as skilled migration as well. So unfortunately not the US yet, but we will be working on it. LA may be next on our list. Next question.
Next questions. For the permanent residency, do I get more points whether I live in a regional area?
Okay, so if you're looking at, again, at skilled migration, there are some benefits for skilled migration and employer sponsorship if you are in a regional area of Australia. So for skilled migration, if you study in a regional area for 2 years, so say you came and you did your master's degree at the University of the Sunshine Coast, that would give you an additional 5 points towards general skilled migration for just that study in a regional area. There's also other ways with skilled migration with respects to state sponsorship that being in a regional area can give you an additional 10 points as well. So if a state or territory government, there's 6 states and 2 territories in Australia, but if one of those states or territory chooses to sponsor your occupation, then they may choose to nominate you, which could give you an extra 10 points, and then you would have to go and live and work in that regional area for a period of 2 years as a pathway towards getting residency. And the reason the government does that is that a lot of new migrants or people, when they migrate to a country, they tend to go to the metropolitan areas like the cities. So when they go to the cities, they basically are moving into areas that are already heavily populated. And I guess one of the things that the migration or the immigration department and the Australian government wants is a little bit more of that decentralisation. So to help regional communities grow, that's why there's additional benefits for both studying and migrating to regional parts of Australia.
Thank you. Another question, in terms of migration, what are the first steps that we need to keep in mind when our first visa is going to be a student visa, but we want to migrate to Australia?
Okay, yep, I think I've got that one. So, I mean, listen, if your ultimate aim is to migrate to Australia, or you're thinking, I guess, about migration to Australia and what the criteria is for migration to Australia, your first step probably should be to touch base with a migration agent or a migration professional before you enroll in that course that you're going to study, okay? So one of the reasons I'd say that, or I'll give you an example, is that the 485 or the post-study work visa that allows international students who study for 2 years in Australia and do a bachelor, master's or PhD course, if you enroll in study that's less than 2 years, say 18 months, a master's for 18 months, you're not actually eligible for the post-study work visa. So if you had a consultation with a migration agent or someone that understood the rules prior to enrolling in your master's, instead of enrolling in a master's for 1.5 years, you may enroll in a master's degree that's for 2 years as well. Similarly, if you have an occupation that the criteria you haven't quite met with your overseas study, we may be able to provide advice on what study you can do in Australia to put you in a better position for other visas once you graduate as well. So again, just to recap, it's really important that you get advice, I guess, from a registered migration agent in the early stages of your process. And that way you'll make sure that you're on the right track from the start. We do have a lot of times, or a lot of cases, I guess, where people that come into Australia may or may not have been given the wrong advice, or may have been given the wrong advice at an early stage. And if that happens, it's a little bit harder to backtrack if you already have a visa, you've already paid for a course, and then you realise once arriving that it's not the one that you need to do. Similarly, on the other hand, what we also have a lot of times is that people that come in to study courses in Australia, but as part of the process, they've already met the requirements for residency. And what this means is that they don't actually need to continue with those courses and they may be able to apply for another visa earlier in that process.
Thank you. Another question, in terms of education, which is the best city in Australia?
That's a tough question. I mean, we're based in Queensland and in Brisbane, so obviously this is one of the areas that we would say is a great city to study in. But when it comes to studying, I mean, Australia has a number of providers Australia-wide in different cities and locations around that all have good universities and I guess world-class universities, English colleges as well. So I guess in talking to a counsellor, the most important thing to do is probably talk to them about what it is you're looking for in Australia, even if it's a career sort of change or where you're looking to, I guess, further yourself. For instance, the biggest cities, I guess, Sydney and Melbourne, do have some great universities. Obviously, they're a lot more populated, so they can be a little bit more expensive, living standards, for example, in those areas. So based on that, it's just good to be aware, I guess, of that at an early part of the process. Brisbane, on the other hand, and places like Adelaide tend to be a little bit cheaper, as does the Gold Coast. When you're coming to study with an area like the Gold Coast, where we also have an office, you can get a lot more opportunities, I guess, in hospitality work or other part-time work that you can potentially do while you are studying your course as well. So do keep the questions coming online. There are a few coming in via email as well. So just to reiterate, we're Education and Migration Services. This seminar is open to anyone to log on and ask questions about anything to do with studying in Australia, migration, and potential pathways to other visas in Australia.
Regarding the latest issues that have happened with education agencies, what is the best advice you can give us to avoid to have those issues?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, it was obviously really unfortunate for international students with what happened with one of the agencies that recently closed up its doors. Again, I won't go into too much details on that, but again, it's really important to make sure that you choose a reputable agency. I mean, from our perspective, most of our business, probably 70 or 80%, comes through word of mouth communications. So ask your friends, get advice from other people who have experienced, and get their feedback on, you know, what the agency was like. I mean, ultimately, agents are there to assist you in the process, and generally the services are free of charge. I guess in the case that happened, a few students had paid the agencies and lost their money. So in that sort of situation, you know, you can always, in our case, we generally get our clients to pay the money directly to the school. So we don't generally handle any client's money. So the money goes straight from your account to the school, and there's no sort of, I guess, third party or us in between in that process, which I think from the students that we spoke to was one of the failings, is that they'd actually given their money to a third party in between, and because of that, they lost their money when they disappeared as well. But ultimately, ask questions, make sure you feel like the advice you're getting is correct, and that you feel comfortable and confident with the agency that you're dealing with as well.
Can you please explain the differences between the post-study visa and the graduate visa?
Yep, okay. So generally the post-study visa and the graduate visa are in essence are the same visa. They both fall under the category or the subclass, as they say in immigration, which is the 485 visa. The post-study visa, as I've mentioned a couple of times today, was introduced a couple of years ago by the Immigration Department to encourage more students to study at a university level. So that visa, the post-study work visa, is only available to people who study a bachelor degree or a master's degree by coursework or research, or a PhD that's at least 2 years in duration. If they've done that 2 years in duration and they got their first student visa after the 5th of November 2011, then they're eligible for that visa for 2 years to work post their studies. Now, that visa can be granted with a combination of both. So, for example, we've had some clients that have come to Australia to finish a year of their bachelor degree and then done a master's degree to make up their 2 years, and that worked. Others have studied 2 different masters to meet those requirements as well. So there are different ways that you can meet those requirements, and that's the post-study work visa. With the other stream, the graduate work stream, basically the graduate work stream is for people who have an occupation that's on the government's skilled occupation list, okay? So this is the list that can change each July, on the 1st of July. Generally, there's about 190 odd occupations on that list. But if you have an occupation on that list and you can get a skills assessment or a provisional skills assessment in an occupation on that list, then you can apply for a graduate 485 visa, which is for 18 months, okay? Now that visa, the requirements on what you need to study is different. It can either be a trade course in the certificate range, or it can be a diploma and advanced diploma. So to give you an example that we see quite commonly, we have a number of engineers that come from overseas. Now, doing a course in project management can be beneficial to an engineer's, I guess, experience and resume, and career, I should say. But so if they were to come in and study a 2-year package of, say, a diploma and advanced diploma in project management, if they were, say, a civil engineer back in their home country, they got a skills assessment as a civil engineer, then at the end of those 2 years, if they didn't have the points to apply for residency, they could still apply for the graduate work 18-month visa. So that would give them the opportunity to work in Australia, get some more experience, maybe increase their points, maybe find a sponsor, maybe fall in love, who knows. But either way, it would give them an opportunity to extend their stay in Australia. So they're the 2 different streams, the post-study work stream and the graduate work stream for that 485 visa.
We got a question.
There's another question coming through. What should I do? Thanks, Kayla. Kayla's question is, what should I do if I want to study childcare to apply for a skilled visa? Okay, so we're actually going to put out a blog article in the next few days on this one. It is a bit of a topical one that we get. So childcare manager is one of the occupations that's on the skilled occupation list. But I have to stress that it is childcare centre manager. Okay, so it's not like a regular worker or a group leader, it's actually the highest position. So if you're looking at an organisation like a childcare centre, there would probably be one manager, an assistant manager, a lot of group leaders, and then a lot of childcare workers under that. So by studying the diploma in children's services, it's kind of treated like a trade occupation. So if you study that course, and that course runs for a period of 2 years, and as long as you get, say, 360 hours of practical experience during that course, then you are able to apply for a provisional skills assessment. Okay, so for that, you need things like reference letters. If you do have pay slips as well, it doesn't necessarily have to be paid, but you do need to show logbooks and as much information as you can to make sure that you get that provisional assessment. Now, with that provisional assessment and an IELTS score of at least 6 overall and nothing less than 5, you can then apply for that last visa that we just talked about, the 485 graduate work visa. Now, in most cases with other occupations that fall under that trade category, you could get 1 year experience and then apply for residency. And this is the same for that childcare centre manager too. But the difference is it's very hard to get experience straight out of school as a manager. Usually that's something that it would take years to kind of work up to. So it might be a little bit different. One of the more common pathways we see for people in childcare is that they would tend to study the diploma in children's services, go through the process to get the graduate 485 visa. When they have that visa, if they were to move to, say, a regional area of Australia, which may be Cairns, for example, if you're here in Queensland, might be Geelong in Victoria, if they were to move to that regional area and be able to find a centre, a childcare centre that was willing to sponsor them, they could potentially sponsored for residency as a group leader. Okay, so it's one position down, but they could be sponsored as a group leader for permanent residency. Now, the reason it's kind of a win-win for the employer and for the employee as well, because one of the things that regional areas, like I said earlier, have trouble doing is securing long-term staff because they've obviously got smaller populations. So the benefit of regional sponsorship in the childcare, in the group leader position, is that the employee will stay with the employer for a period of 2 years. So it gives them that continuity from an employer's perspective, and from the employee's perspective, you're getting permanent residency as well. So that's one of the more common pathways we see. For that, there are obviously processes that the employer and the employee need to go through. And if you want more information on that, we can obviously have a consultation and talk in more depth about that as well. So just at this point, I'll take one more second just to recap and let you know that we are Education and Migration Services Australia. We're an education and migration agency based in Queensland, in Victoria as well, and we have numerous offices overseas. We've got an awesome team of education and migration professionals, both registered migration agents, qualified education counsellors, and we can basically support you in anything that involves coming to Australia, whether that's your kids want to come and study high school in Australia, through to English courses, through to vocational courses, university courses. We can also assist in the skill migration process. We do partner, parent visas, a lot of employer-sponsored visas as well, particularly in the hospitality industry we work in, but anything that you need, we can pretty much assist in helping you come to Australia. As Deanna mentioned earlier, we'll be having a free migration seminar, which is coming up next week after next. We'll be having the seminars in Sydney, the Gold Coast, Melbourne and Brisbane. And if you check our website, www.emsaus.com or Eventbrite, emsaus.eventbrite.com.au, you can register online for those. They are free seminars. And again, it gives you the opportunity to come along and ask any questions that you have. The presentation will last generally for about half an hour. And then post that, you can ask any questions that you have at those seminars as well. So we have had another question or two come in. I'll just read the next one off the list. From David. David, a friend has an occupation in the sea soul and his girlfriend's in the soul. Can he use his occupation to give her an extra 5 points? Okay, so that's an interesting one, David. Generally speaking, if you have an occupation that's on the sea soul, you don't qualify for skill migration unless you're sponsored by a state or territory government. So to give you an example of that, in Queensland on the state sponsorship list, they've had primary school teacher. Okay, so if she was applying as a primary school teacher, and she was sponsored by the Queensland government, but still needed additional points. And he had an occupation on the main list and had a skills assessment and was included in that application, then yes, he could give her the additional 5 points. But generally speaking, someone with just an occupation on the CSOL can't apply independently unless they've got state sponsorship. Okay, so if it was the other way around and he was on the SOL and she was on the CSOL, then no, she couldn't give him points because she's not on that list either. I hope that made sense. It's a little bit of a tough situation, but if you did want more information on that, welcome to come into one of our offices. Next question. Okay, my parents want to come to Australia to live with me. Is there any way for this to happen? Yep. Okay, so when it comes to parent visas, there's a range of different parent visas available. The one we see most commonly is the contributory parent visa. The reason being is that the immigration put a limit a few years ago on the actual parent visa category, and they've capped that number each year. So what that means is if you apply for a general parent visa, okay, then it would take up to 30 years to be granted. The contributory parent visa can be granted in as little as 2 years. Okay, generally it's taking just over 2 years to be granted. To apply for any type of parent visa in Australia, any permanent type of parent visa in Australia, you need to make sure that the balance of family has Australian residency. So Kayla, in your case, if you had permanent residency in Australia, then, and you had, say, one sister, and she was living, let's say, I don't know where you're from, let's say Peru, and so if you were in Australia, had one sister, she's in Peru, then 50% of the family or the children are in Australia, then yes, you could apply. If you had 2 siblings that were in Peru and you were here, then you wouldn't qualify for the parent visa simply because the balance, the family, would be outside of Australia. So based on that, you wouldn't quite meet those requirements. There are also other temporary parent visas. There were some new ones recently announced. Even tourist visas for parents, if you have children, for example, can be granted for 3 or 5 years depending on the circumstances. So again, that's something that we can look into or get into more specifics with you personally as well. All right, well, we might try and wrap it up. Listen, thank you very much for coming along. This is the first of our live chats for 2017, and we'll be running a lot more, probably on a monthly basis moving throughout the year. But if you do have any questions or queries, feel free to type them into the chat, and like we did today, we'll raise them next time we do an event. All right, thank you very much for your time, and just to reiterate, we're Education and Migration Services, got some migration seminars coming up next month. Check out our website, emsaus.com. Thank you.